Oh, hey brother, are you there? Did you fall off the earth? Did you forget that we're hosting a YouTube channel that has largely no value or importance outside of our own narcissism and vanity? Because don't worry, I didn't. This week I want to dive into the epistemological nightmare that is The Good Place. For those of you who haven't watched it, The Good Place is an afterlife and sometimes during life, #JeremyBaramy, saga of 4 humans, 1 demon, and 1 non-girl and their collective salvation. Oh, real quick, this episode is chock full of The Good Place spoilers, so if you don't want anything ruined for you, I'd look away now. The show follows Eleanor Shellstrop, an Arizona trash bag, Chidi Anagonye, a moral philosophy professor, Tahani Al-Jamil, an aristocratic socialite, and Jason Mendoza, a pre-successful DJ from Florida. The 4 of them meet in a pre-designed neighborhood called The Good Place. They're introduced to Michael, the neighborhood's architect, and Janet, the neighborhood's sentient AI. By the end of the first season, however, we learn that The Good Place is indeed the bad place, and all of the neighborhood's charming little eccentricities like frozen yogurt and soulmates are actually cruelly imposed elements designed to foster self-perpetuated torture among the humans. The show uses Chidi's ethical studies to examine morality in a really refreshing way for primetime television. And in pursuit of this, we find ourselves asking the same questions the show is asking: what makes a good life well lived? Now, part of why this episode took so long to come out is because I realized how woefully ill-prepared I was to tackle a subject as heady as this one. I'm not a philosopher or philosophy professor or someone who looks at philosophical texts so I can bring them up in casual conversations just to sound smart. Well, until now. So fair warning here, I'm not an authority on this matter. Take everything I'm about to say with a big heaping bowl of salt. Right, so I expected to find really obvious signs that the show was a case study in meta-ethics as soon as I started diving into the subject matter. Oh, right, so this is something that I learned. Meta-ethics is the branch of ethics that's designed to understand the nature of ethical properties and frameworks. It's like the study of ethics. See, I thought this would be a really straightforward discussion about ethical frameworks and how those ethical frameworks are purposefully illustrated in the show. Instead, what I found was a hodgepodge of loose ideas kind of strung together for the purposes of the narrative, like entertainment. Oh, great, so there's no point? Can I stop watching your stupid beard now? No, just hang here with me for a second. I promise I'm going somewhere. I think. In Season 3, Episode 4, Chidi gives us a starting point when looking to evaluate this world's ethical frameworks. He describes 3 normative ethical systems. The systems that Chidi describes are virtue ethics, consequentialism, and deontology. He also describes one non-normative system called nihilism. So does the show prescribe any of these systems as the best way to live? And how exactly does one get into the good place? Let's start with nihilism. What is nihilism? Nihilism, or existential nihilism, is a school of thought first developed by Friedrich Nietzsche. It argues that life is without objective meaning or intrinsic value, that morality is something that we as people create, as opposed to some set of rules etched into the side of a mountain by some all-knowing rule maker. As of now, the show seems to suggest against this concept. There is a meaning to life. That meaning is to get into the good place. In fact, the entire concept of good place and bad place means that there are constructions that exist outside of and independent of human perception, and that those constructions have purpose and design. Speaking of design and purpose, let's talk about deontology. Right, so deontology is a set of ethics that assumes that there are strict and knowable rules that define right and wrong, and that an action is only moral if it strictly adheres to this specific rule set. So there are a number of different versions of deontology that follow different rule sets and derive their value of those rule sets from different places, but for the good place we have the point system. Now, the problem with a direct comparison for deontology is found in Doug Forsett. The show posits that Doug Forsett is the only human to figure out the good place, bad place point system. Having mostly figured out the system, Doug begins living his life in a strict adherence to earning as many good place points as possible. We soon learn, however, that none of his efforts have actually landed Doug any closer to the good place. In fact, if anything, they've turned him into an ineffectual zealot dedicated to a life of hardship and, like, pee drinking. And while we don't yet know why, we do know that Doug has been living a life as strictly adhered to by the rules as possible. The fact that Doug isn't getting into the good place means that the strict rule system that Doug follows isn't actually where morality comes from. So if a specific set of rules isn't where morality comes from, how about the outcome of a specific action? For that, let's move on to consequentialism. Consequentialism is often contrasted to deontology because instead of saying that morality comes from a specific set of rules, moral value is ascribed to the outcome of a specific action. Take the trolley problem, for example. A deontologist would argue that taking any action would constitute a moral wrong and would leave the participant partially responsible for the death that occurred, in spite of who or how many people died or even how many deaths it prevented. The consequentialist, however, would argue that the correct answer is to kill the one person because the death of one is preferable to the death of 5. The show does have evidence to suggest that consequentialism is not the proper ethical framework the show is trying to promote, and that evidence is mostly embodied in that hot, rich fraud with legs for days, Tahani Al-Jamil. You see, Tahani spent her life devoted to various philanthropic high society efforts, including a fundraiser that raised thousands of dollars for charity. But we find out that those efforts did little to save her soul, as her motivations were trash. So in spite of all the good that Tahani did, she still ended up in the bad place. The outcome of her actions was overridden by her motivations. Okay, so I'd like to state for the record that I don't think the show perfectly conforms to any one specific ethical system, but I do think that it does come close to one: virtue ethics. Virtue ethics focuses on a person's character rather than the outcome of their actions or any specific rule. According to Aristotle, the moral application of your character comes down to proper function. All things have a function, and something that doesn't live up to that function is a bad version of the thing it's supposed to be. For Aristotle, a person who doesn't live up to that function would be a bad person and would probably end up in the bad place. That function includes growing, socializing, and using logic and reason to understand the world around them. Of course, being virtuous isn't just something that someone is, but rather is a practiced skill that someone can hone through experience. So which character has spent the most amount of time on the show gaining experience to become a good person? Eleanor. Time and time again, Eleanor realized the good place was actually the bad place, causing Michael to reset the neighborhood each time. This gave Eleanor a track record of relearning how to be a good person, giving her a greater ability to act with virtue after each reboot. Wait, how do we know that Eleanor was acting virtuously? Well, Aristotle believed that virtue was the sweet spot between two extremes, and that a virtuous person could learn to find that sweet spot. Take lying, for example. It's not exactly virtuous when Eleanor lies to her roommate about ripping her dress, especially when that rip results in a viral freakout and a bunch of t-shirts sold for a profit. But in the episode Rhonda, Diane, Jake, and Trent, Eleanor explains that she is now a moral particularist. A moral particularist believes that moral judgment can only be found when one considers the particular facts of any given situation, and that a virtuous person would know exactly how to act given all the facts. In this way, Eleanor helps Chidi with his moral aversion to lying by reminding him that telling the truth would lead to the capture and torture of all of his friends. Eleanor found the sweet spot between lying to profit off the misery of others and never lying to the detriment of others. I also think it's worth pointing out two things. Eleanor is a constant proponent of trying. Her internal moral compass often leads them through very uncertain waters, and so far has proven to be successful. Also, Eleanor was the only one to pass the judge's test designed to deny or grant them access to the good place. So if there isn't an easily identifiable moral compass for us to follow to become better people, how is the good place self-help? Well, according to philosophers Schopenhauer and Hegel, art is vastly more important than we give it credit for. According to Schopenhauer, spending a life immersed in art and philosophy is the only way to alleviate the pains found in the absurdities of life. Hegel thought that music, painting, design, architecture, literature were all supremely important and beautiful vessels through which ideas could be taught. And it's here that we find our value for the good place. With its creative knee-jerk storytelling, its lovable and relatable characters, its purposeful and pristine set design, and its actors' earnest performances, we're gifted with a beautiful and entertaining vessel through which we can engage with philosophical ideas that are normally really boring and really dense and really dry. Now, I definitely did a lot of research when it came to this episode, probably not nearly as much as I should have to give it like a real sense of meaning. Part of it was because of the episode itself, but also part of it was because, you know, I was curious about how the show handled all of these philosophical theories. It made me want to learn about philosophy and philosophy's prognosticators, and it's this like tip of the iceberg understanding that's really helped me to be a better person and think about the world in different ways than I ever had before. So while The Good Place doesn't exactly give us a checklist of how to be better people, it does provide us an entertaining way by which we can become curious and sort of slightly educated about philosophy. And while I don't have my current point value handy, I'm willing to bet that it's helped me be a better person, even if ever so slightly. What do you think? Does The Good Place act as a proper catalyst to think about what it means to be a good person, or is it just a fun jaunt through an imagined afterlife? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. In my next episode, I'll be covering two of Pawnee's most famous political theorists, Leslie Knope and Ron Swanson. Cameron, I love you.